Welcome to Global Take, presented by School Rubric, a show about the international teaching experience. Teaching internationally is one of the best decisions you can make as an educator. In this show, we will meet teachers and administrators from around the globe living and working internationally. Our hope is that their stories and experiences will inspire you to explore the world of education. We will learn about all aspects of international teaching, from becoming an international teacher to what countries are the best fit for you, to the challenges of being away from your home country. Come take this unforgettable journey to the world of international schools with Global Take, presented by School Rubric.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Global Take. We're live here again on School Rubric and really excited to have you all with us, whether you're watching live, the recording, maybe you're just scrolling through your feed and happen to stop by. Regardless, we're happy to have you here. And before we go any further, we have some big news. If you've watched the last few shows, you might have realized there's a new opening you just saw. And that is because we are now weekly. So as of today, there'll be a Global Take episode every week for you. And we will go into all different areas of international education, not just athletics. Bit more on that later. We want to get into this conversation because today we're talking about inclusive versus competitive athletic programs and how we can strike a balance. Okay, we have some great guests yet again from all around the world. We have Paraguay, Indonesia, and Azerbaijan with us today. And guys, thanks for being here.
Thanks for
we want to hear a little bit about you to start. So Maytham in Azerbaijan, why don't you kick us off and give us a bit of a background?
Yeah, Nick, thank you so much for having me on this episode. My name is Maytham Rubaye. I'm the Athletics and Activities Director in the International School of Azerbaijan, and I'm also the CAS coordinator.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, let's move to Paraguay. Gwinyai, please.
Yes. Thank you, Nick. Thank you to your team for giving us this forum, to share our ideas and things that we're passionate about. I'm Gwinyai Jambga. I'm the Athletics and Activities Director at the American School of Asuncion. I'm in my 5th year and excited to share some insight with you all.
Great. Thanks for being here. Last but not least, let's go to Indonesia. Noah.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me on. My name's Noah Bohnen, and I'm proud to serve as the middle school principal at Jakarta Intercultural School. This is my 1st year in Jakarta, and I'm coming most recently from the Anglo-American School of Moscow, where I served there as the middle school principal as well.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks. And just before we get into the question and our discussion, if you're watching out there and you're on YouTube or Facebook, we'd love to hear from you. Please either write a comment or a question as we go through the show, and we'll answer as many as we can. So looking forward to hear from you. Okay. Question 1, let's start this off. We got a great question from Todd, who's in Jordan. Let's take a look.
Hi, Nick. This is Todd Parham from American Community School in Amman, Jordan. Thanks for having me on and answering my questions. So my question is, how do you get your parent community to buy in and support the inclusive model of sports programs versus the traditional competitive sports program? These parents with the competitive kids, they don't like having to share playing time or having less skilled athletes on their teams. How do you guys deal with it? Thanks.
Great question, Todd. Thank you. All about parent buy-in and maybe dealing with some of those parents that are maybe just a bit too competitive for the rest of the people in the school. Gwinyai, can you kick us off?
Sure. It is a great question, something that I've dealt with quite often. But the way you solve that problem is you develop a sports department handbook or some sort of code of conduct that mirrors your school's mission and vision statement. One thing that we all know is that the parents have already bought into the school's mission and vision statement on the academic side. So it should be natural for that to translate to the activities and the sports side. So inclusivity is a word that associates itself already with most of our schools' mission and vision statements. So the transition should be easy for us to teach. So my point is that the buy-in is there already. I think what just needs to be done is reinforced and embraced by all the stakeholders in the school community.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot. We are set up for that, right? In a lot of ways.
We are.
Noah?
We are. Yeah.
Noah,
I like. It's a really good question, and I think too there's more than one level to it, right? So you have to look at it developmentally, from a middle school perspective, but then you also have to look at it from a high school perspective. And I think if you want to have an inclusive program in the middle school, there's lots of ways that you can do that with parents that you won't get too much of a kickback. But I think if you want to move towards a totally inclusive model in a high school, it's going to require a little bit more. So that point of attaching it to your mission and vision of your school that's best practice. But I think, we've been international schools for a long time, and we've put a lot of changes in, and you have to get the parents on board. And so I think there's a duty to educate parents and to say that, what is the goal of our athletics program? Is it to create professional athletes? Because if that's our goal, I would argue that most international schools haven't been very successful at that, right? I think the goal here is to create people that are passionate about sports, that want to play sports when they're in their mid-40s like we are. And that's the real goal. So how do you do that? You instill the skills and the passion when they're younger. And you really develop that by wearing the jersey, right? And playing against other teams. So I think, again, like I said, there is a place for that competitive piece. Absolutely. But I think if you want to make that shift, yes, put it in the handbook. Yes, attach it to the mission, be clear on the goals, but bring the parents in and let them know the why and explain it and field those questions and be brave and stand in front of it.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And we often do hear that, like, oh, it's just middle school. Now it's varsity soccer. So it's totally different. We hear that a lot. Maytham, what about in Azerbaijan?
It goes exactly what my colleagues were talking about. It's about putting it in the handbook and focusing on the wording of it, which is student athlete. That students come first, athletes come second, and that will cover your inclusive part of the equation. However, if you would also like to evolve on it, you could probably strike the balance between fitness and playtime. So usually the more competitive parents, they are fitter kids. They can run for hours, where the developing ones can't cope with that. So when you start bringing in the culture of fitness into the equation and start pushing the kids to increase that, then you should be safe with parents and with kids by being clear about what the expectations are.
Right. Yeah, I like, like you guys said, to have the written down, have it clear and open. And we found success in the past few years of, not making sure it wasn't hidden in our handbook or on our webpage. So we created a new webpage called Why We Do What We Do. And we had some main things highlighted and direct parents there. And it talks about educational athletics and how that's the cornerstone. Whether it's a inclusive or competitive program or not, that's what we're there for, right? And we also include sports specialization. So those competitive parents, they maybe want to play soccer all year long and not just for 3 months. So yeah, having it open and available and not just hidden away, in a long, maybe outdated handbook is important too. Yeah.
To pick up on that, it's also important, I think, this is something that we're doing here with some partners of ours in Latin America, to develop non-competitive activities. with some of our partners here in South America, we're trying to develop a league, and we've done it through the pandemic. We're actually on our third virtual event. We hosted a RoboHack in October, which was attended by 65 kids. My colleague in Sao Paulo, Avenue School, hosted a virtual music event. Actually today, my colleague in Colombia is hosting a art festival. And we've actually been able to draw some kids that you wouldn't normally see trying out for sports, and this is their avenue. So I think it's also very important to look at the kid and say, perhaps we need to listen to them and offer them other avenues of competition and being included in something that they're passionate about. So that seems to be working at my school.
Right.
I think to that point that, one, we're going to learn something from this pandemic, right? Where it's important to have in-house activities and in-house competitive opportunities for kids to engage in, because, for the next year or so more, we might not be able to compete against each other, like on the international stage. Right. But I also think that there's lessons to learn from middle school, right? But I think that the way that the middle school manages it, where, we might have a team or two that we send out, but then we put a lot of effort into having the development program and bringing in the local schools so those kids have a chance to compete. There's absolutely no reason why that can't be mirrored in high school programs, but I rarely see it done. It's so often that we do a good job of that in the middle school, and then you go to the high school and it's like, you got the varsity team, you've got the junior varsity team, and if that doesn't work out for you, try something else, go to the gym and work out. And so I think that, again, the goal is we want to create lifelong athletes, like kids that want to play sport and they want to be athletic and they want to be active. And of course, there's a lesson to be learned when you don't make a team, right? It's happened to me before. It's a great lesson. You have to pick yourself back up. But I think when you pick yourself back up, you should still be able to play that sport in a different arena.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that goes with culture, in the school, right? We may give them the opportunities. Hey, if you got cut from varsity or JV, there's this. But if the culture is not there to motivate the kids to go out and keep trying, it's easy for them to just say, okay, I got cut, I'm out of here. And goes a long way with, who are your coaches? What's the atmosphere like around the program? And yeah, important. And it's easy, right? When we have banners in our gyms and people are paying to fly to a season-ending tournament, it often adds the sense of competitiveness that maybe isn't necessary or isn't real competitive. Just because we're flying somewhere doesn't mean we have to win that tournament, right?
And yeah, it's also the coaches. It's, I think, the biggest responsibility on that comes on the coaches, unfortunately. And there's not much we can do sometimes, but yeah, preparing the child as the season develops and when the time comes for the cut, the kids should be comfortable enough to step aside. But that comes from coaches mostly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, we've been touching on cutting here in a little bit of our answers. So let's go to question 2, because that's what it focuses on. And we'll hear from Omar, who's not too far away from you, Noah, in Jakarta as well.
Hey, Global Take team, how's it going? My name is Omar Pateo, and I am assistant head here at the British School in Jakarta. I'm in charge of the athletics and activities here. I've got a question for you guys today. I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. If you have a no-cut policy at your school, does that include all teams and sports, or does it vary, and does having a no-cut policy affect your team's performance? Looking forward to your answer, guys. Thanks very much.
Great. Yeah, great extension of what we've just been talking about. If we do cut, is it through the whole program? And then what about that performance piece? So Noah, can you kick us off?
Sure. And if it's okay, I'm going to do middle school and high school. So from the middle school perspective, we don't cut, but we typically have one traveling team or 2 traveling teams, and then there'll be a development team on the side. And I think the philosophy of the middle school to have, a very inclusive approach to the athletics, it does shake out into not performing as well, right? Like culturally, we encourage our coaches not to sit kids in the whole final game, right? You should expect to play at least a half. And does that impact the team's performance? I mean, absolutely, it impacts the team performance. I mean, if we, a lot of the times these international schools, we're lucky if we can have a great starting lineup in basketball or volleyball. And if we sit some of our strongest players for a quarter of the game or a half a game, I mean, I've coached a ton of soccer, I've coached a ton of sports. It absolutely impacts the performance. But I think it's important to remember that a lot of the times those really top kids on your team, they're playing soccer somewhere else, right? They're playing basketball in the club. They're having those other opportunities. And yes, there's that big tournament, but that's not the whole season, right? I think in high school, you know, we have a cut policy at Jakarta Intercultural School, and we did when we were in Moscow. But there were two teams. There was a JV and there was a varsity team. But yeah, I think that if we didn't do cuts at all in our schools, then it would be very, very hard to compete. I think that that's a fair statement, because not every school is going to adopt the inclusive model at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
That's true. That's true.
No,
Maytham?
Yeah. So in our school, we have local tournaments and international tournaments. And the international tournaments, we're limited with the number of teams we can send away. So within CISA, let's say, we're allowed only one team. So we have basically no problem. We have to make a selection. We have a limited number. We can't take everybody on the trip. So in that sense, we limit, there is no problem. But when it comes to local tournaments, where we are more or less in control, we include everybody. We just create as many teams as possible. And the positivity of that, I found that when you have many teams in a certain division, it's kind of a sign to create your own club in the school and start competing in a local tournament, because you have the numbers. And this is really a positive side of it.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And that builds on what Noah said before of having a competitive program, you know, either within your own school even or own city, country, and not just relying on flying and these, you know, limits on housing, right? Yeah. Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
Gwinyai, over to you.
Yes. Yeah. At ASA, our philosophy, we actually have teams that range from sub-6 all the way to varsity. So we have two different philosophies, from sub-6 up until sub-12. It's all inclusive, no cut, and it's incumbent on the AD and the coaches to make sure that everybody plays equal amount of time during the year. Our sports season runs from August until end of May. So our kids are very active from kindergarten all the way to varsity. So there's no lack of tournaments here, which makes it easier for the younger kids to be able to play year round, you know, develop the skills, teamwork, etc. Once you get to sub-15 and varsity, that's when the competition steps in, and that's when there are cuts. I think it builds character. I think Noah said that. You know, we've all been cut. You know, and you pick yourself up, because once you leave high school, it's all competitive after that. You know, your whole life is competing for, you know, places in college, places in jobs, etc. So at our school, we have two different philosophies for you know, the different age groups, and it seems to create a balance, because by the time the kids get to sub-15, they either love the sport or not, or choose to go and find another passion. So in our school, we actually adopt two different philosophies, but the no cut policy from sub-6 to sub-12 works perfectly over here.
Right. Right. That's great. There's a comment from Alia who's watching, and she says there it does have an impact on student development, right? And their growth. But, you know, I think it depends on how you spin it, right? And what you said, Gwinyai, it's preparing kids for later in life. You don't always get what you want. If we're open, you know, I mentioned this why we do what we do page. Well, there's two sections on there talking about how we cut at AIS and what you should do or what you can do when your child gets cut. Some tips, you know, to help them get through it. And we run a competitive program. We say that there may not be a space for everybody, but we try our best. We make new teams. You know, C teams, even if it's a few kids that are at the bottom, we'll offer them a one-day skills opportunity. Try to get them something. But, you know, location, facilities, for a program like swimming, we're limited in lanes. So we just have no way around it. We can't keep extra swimmers, right? So I think we can have a great balance between an inclusive and competitive program. But not everybody always gets what they want, right? It's just the way it is. But in the program itself, you know, when you have that culture, hey, you don't have a spot on this team, try this sport. You haven't played it before, but it may be a new passion for you, right? And it's great.
Yeah,
great.
I think Gwinyai, your point too, like it is developmental and it's on a continuum, right? So in 7th grade, you have some kids that are fully pubertized, they look like men. And then other kids aren't quite there yet, but they're still capable of developing the skill. And you wouldn't want those kids to not have an opportunity to compete when they're 15 because they didn't get the opportunity when they're 12, right? But once you kids get to be about 16 years old, I think I'm with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as it goes up, and you know, Maytham, you mentioned it, we have to cut for our rosters at some point.
Yeah,
you know, so
that's very helpful. The rosters, it's when you build in the policy and the handbooks in place.
Yes,
that basically set the tone for the whole community. To be very clear about it, you don't have the struggle of explaining, and so. But again, providing local competition is very helpful, and you will basically not need to cut anybody if you have control over what you create locally.
Yeah, exactly. And a great question from Mo here. He says it's a bit off subject, but I think it relates really well, you know, because we're talking about programs and being inclusiveness. And he asks, you know, how do we promote multi-sport athletes? I know what I want to say, but maybe one of you guys want to jump in first.
I can jump in. On the our sports season over here, like I said, it's year round. So kids have an opportunity to play soccer, basketball, and volleyball. Volleyball only starts in middle school, but we do have some varsity athletes. Whenever we go to our local tournaments, they could be playing each of those sports the whole weekend. And the way we promote it is we give them the opportunity to choose which sports they want to play, and keeping in mind that you're trying to minimize injuries, etc., because our kids are playing in numerous sports, but we want to encourage it. I mean, it's something that we don't discourage. It's something that's encouraged, because then as the kid grows up, they'll know that maybe I'm not getting playing time on the volleyball team. I'm going to stick to soccer and basketball, you know, for example. So yeah. It is something that we do balance and encourage over here.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I think it's crazy not to be a multi-sport athlete at an international high school. I mean, if you are, I mean, there's very few kids that I've worked with at the, you know, in international schools that have gone on to Division I teams. And as a result, I think that learn a lot of sports, play a lot of games, get involved in a lot of teams, meet a lot of people. And I think that will make you a great lifelong athlete. But for the most part, we're not the breeding grounds for those people that are going to be professional athletes. And so for most kids, it's the best option for their own personal development.
Right.
Yeah, and also in the international schools in general, we don't have overlapping sports usually because of the limitation facility. So we have to end football, start basketball, end basketball, start track and field. And if they want to do a sport all year long, it has to be the club. So right. Automatically our athletes are in multiple sports.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's when we talk about it here, we talk about our athletic program, you know, and all teams, we always talk about the program. Then you're a knight, right? And, you know, one team isn't favored over another. You know, you're going to get the same experience as a student if you're on the basketball team, the volleyball team, the track team. You're going to have great caring coaches. You're going to have nice equipment, all those things across the board. And I think that's a way to promote those athletes playing other sports, you know, and of course, having great PE teachers and coaches that coach multiple seasons that encourage you. Hey, great job out there on the cross country team. Why don't we get a basketball in your hand next season? You know, and that's just a great way to look at it from my perspective. It's a program. You're all knights, and take part in everything you can. Great. Well, I think we're all kind of on the same page here, the four of us, with our inclusive programs, but also having a competitive balance, it seems like. If there's anything you guys would want to change in your athletic program at your school right now to maybe make it a bit more inclusive or a bit more competitive, would there be anything? Anyone daring enough to jump in?
Yes, I am. Noah mentioned something in the beginning about the pandemic makes you think outside the box, and we need to be realistic. Once we get past the pandemic, there are not going to be many competitions for our students to attend. So this is actually a good opportunity to include some of those kids who wouldn't come in to your program when it was competitive, you know, and open it up. Maybe have like Maytham said, you know, maybe have teams within your school competing against each other, but it's all inclusive, because let's be realistic, we're not going to be traveling a bunch. We're not going to be hosting a bunch, you know, locally or internationally. So this is actually an opportunity to include those kids who may not have come to sports pre-pandemic. So I just wanted to touch on what Noah said early on. So if there is something that I would change, would be, okay, the sports program from sub-6 to varsity is open to all until we get post-pandemic.
Right. Great. That might be something to look into as you move to Paris next year. Congratulations, right? Moving continents.
Yes, moving continents, going back to my my alma mater. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's great. Well, we have a question come up from someone watching who is at the school you're going to, American School in Paris. Gustavo is asking us about our coaches. So we talked about those competitive parents in the question from Todd at the beginning. But what about those competitive coaches? Yeah, has it been a hard sell, Noah?
I love this question, because I think that this question is not just about inclusion. I think this is just about how coaches coach kids, you know, in international schools. And I think it's fair to say, with this fine, esteemed group I have in front of me right now, that we don't expect ADs just to be calendar planners and ordering the gym equipment anymore, right? I think you have a real leadership role and a real leadership opportunity to impart what the philosophy is of your program, you know? And I think that as much as I'm accountable for teachers in the middle school, I think that you guys are accountable for the coaches on the field. And so when those coaches are not representing your school and they're not representing your mission, the first person that I would talk to about it is I'd go talk to the AD. You know, and if that AD needs support, obviously you jump in, but really that's part of you guys being leaders, is imparting what those values are and how we talk to kids and how we win well and how we lose even better, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I totally agree with Noah. I did a coaching certificate, football coaching in England, and half of the course was about how to manage parents. and the trainer literally said, you're not going to be coaching kids, you're going to be managing parents most of the time. And in our athletics position, it's managing coaches most of the time, really. And if you have the right tone and the right relationship between you and the coaches, the program will go very smooth, and you will strike that balance that you're looking for.
Sure. And it goes back to the top of the show when we spoke about our school's mission statements and values. Those need to be a part of the athletic program as well. And if you don't have a buy-in from the coaches, then I guess as AD you bring in your principal, and you reinforce what the school values, the mission statement is all about, and then you educate the coaches as well. We are also educators as athletic directors. You know, we need to educate our coaches Right. Over here, our coaches come in from outside. I think I only have one teacher who's a coach here out of 22. So trying to get that mission statement, to people who actually don't work at the school, that's very challenging. But after a while, you talk to the coaches on a regular basis, you reinforce it, you go to practices and games, and you make those corrections until they're perfect.
Right. Wow, that's something we're very lucky with here, of having a lot of teacher coaches. So you don't have to sell anything to them; they know it. They're in the education business, right?
Exactly. Yes.
If you have so many outdoor coaches coming in and new ones, it's gonna take a lot of work, right? Constantly going to practice. But I think the first thing would be the first part of that interview when they want a job is, talking about your philosophy, talking about your program and how it differs from maybe their club or local teams.
Yeah. And Nick, would you also agree too that we're very quick to offer professional development when it comes to assessment, but sometimes we need to be a little quicker on professional development when it comes to activities like coaching, right? Like bringing someone in and running through some philosophies and how to have those tough conversations. I think that goes a really long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Having schools been able to use their PD money for coach education is great. We're lucky enough to be able to do that in Vienna and hope that it's the case around the world.
Yeah, and we are athletic directors also lucky to have great coaches that we learn from. Really, it's not only we are imposing the policy. Most of the time, they are teaching us the right things because they are closer on the ground and they see more than us usually. So we learn a lot as well.
Great. Well, great, guys. This has been really great. Thank you so much for taking the time to plan with me and be here live for this episode. Thanks for everybody watching that added those comments that helped keep our discussion going and really positive. We hope you can take something from this and make your programs better. Right? That's why we're here. That's what we're talking about, and we really keep keep the discussion going. School Rubric, you see it there. Check out all the great things that they have, not just for athletics. Any kind of educational interest is there. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, Global Take is weekly. We are diverting into other areas. And next week, it's going to be why are all educators should go international. Great host, Ryan Sagar, who's behind the camera right now. He's going to be leading the discussion with Gustavo, who you saw a comment from, good friend Megan, and myself. And that'll be the first week of a weekly show where we get into all sorts of aspects. So if you'd like to be a part of it, write the guys at School Rubric, drop comments in, follow, all that great stuff. And yeah, we appreciate you tuning in. Thank you guys once again.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you for watching School Rubric on YouTube. Make sure that you follow, and subscribe in order to stay looped in on all of our diverse collection of shows, interviews, panels, tutorials, and more from educators around the globe. And visit us at schoolrubric.com for even more great content, such as our online articles, Interact magazine, featured podcasts, and more. Thank you.